So thank you everybody for your participation and presence in this workshop. And again, if you would like to go to the Menti system to interact with the material and answer questions, please go to menti.com and put in the code
Hola Luis, ¿cómo estás?
47128.
Ah, ok, mucho gusto.
And
Te iba a
minute,
preguntar
I'm
algo.
going to
Tenemos una oportunidad.
mute the participant. Okay, there we go. All right, so I would love to know the people in the audience why you are here. If you are willing to let us know why you've shown up today, and you can go to the Menti site, and then so we've got an other. So I'm wondering if we have people who were suggested to attend, if there's people who are interested in sports or sports betting, or people who are already sports betting. And so we've got a couple others. So if anybody is interested in sharing what their other response means, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, maybe we'll just learn more from you later on. Okay, and so to just give you a little heads up about what this workshop will do, we're going to talk about the risks involved in betting and gambling in general. We're going to identify the signs of a potential problem. We're going to list help that's available, and we're going to outline safer betting strategies. But what we will not do is we're not going to tell you to sports bet. We're not going to tell you not to sports bet, and we're not going to tell you how to sports bet. That's not what we're doing here today. And just to kind of get the lay of the land to see where everybody is as far as their knowledge and understanding of gambling and sports betting, I'd ask if anybody who is on the Menti site, if you could answer this question to the best of your ability. If I bet more often, it will help me win more than I lose. And if you don't know, that's okay. You are very welcome to answer that in that way. And then we'll look at some of the information related to this, and then we'll put these questions back up later on too. The second question is, my chances of winning are better after I have lost. If you could let us know what your thoughts are on that. Okay. All right, so moving right in, we want to make sure, and we do have a participant in the chat. Let's see. Yes. Oh, I'm so excited to see hear about why one of our participants here is in attendance, and just a family of huge sports fans and just really interested in this topic and to learn more. So glad you're here. So talking about gambling, we just want to make sure we know what we're talking about. We're talking about when you risk something of value, usually money, on an event that you don't know the outcome of in hopes of winning more money or something of value. Now, does sports betting meet that definition? If anybody has strong feelings one way or the other, please speak up. Otherwise, are we betting money? Do we know the outcome of the event? Do we know it with certainty? No, we don't. And are we hoping to win more money? Yes, we are. So technically, sports betting does meet the definition. So it is gambling. It constitutes gambling. When we talk about this, and sometimes we get people who say, no, it's not, and it's not because there's a great degree of skill involved. What I would like people to realize is that by that definition, it doesn't say anything about skill, because there are some gambling games, poker, for example, blackjack, for example, that they do include a degree of skill, and they are gambling. So they're not mutually exclusive. It may mean that you might have slightly better odds and better outcomes than an unskilled person playing that same game. However, it does meet the definition of gambling. But gambling is not the same thing as gambling disorders. So I will do my best to distinguish when I'm talking about one or the other, but feel free to stop me if you think I've blurred that line. So what is gambling disorder? It's also known as problem gambling, and throughout today I will be probably going back and forth between those two different terms. We're trying to get away from the term problem gambling because it just kind of has a stigma attached to it that doesn't need to be there. It is a disordered way of gambling, an unhealthy way of gambling. And it is the only non-substance addictive disorder recognized by the American Psychiatric Association. So we all know alcohol use disorder, cocaine use disorder, all of these disorders are recognized and recognized as being treatable, and gambling disorder is too. and it's the only one that is not an actual substance. And then it does affect about 2% of the population. So you see my asterisk there again, and again, you'll see that a couple of times throughout the presentation. That asterisk is there is because the last large-scale prevalence study was really around 1999. And so we're looking at numbers that relate to a point in time where gambling looked much different than it does now. So thankfully, with the support of the state, there is a current prevalence and impact study happening in Illinois. And that's very exciting so that we can get an idea of how people are currently impacted in Illinois by gambling disorder so that it can drive the work that we do in prevention strategies and also kind of measure the impact of ongoing gambling expansion on this issue. So what does disordered gambling look like? Well, it looks like needing to increase your bets in order to get the same level of excitement or whatever the experience is that was important to you. So to give you an example, if I would bet $10 a time on a certain event and it was exciting at first and then it really wasn't and I had to go to $25 or $50, that's what that could look like. And it also could be somebody becoming restless or irritable when trying to control their gambling, cutting back or quitting, and then having unsuccessful attempts to control or quit gambling. And then they could also become very preoccupied with gambling. So when we think about sports betting, so this is a little bit difficult. Now, in Illinois and in many regions, there can be some very strong reactions to sports outcomes. And as one of our participants shared in the chat, having a family that's very, very involved and enthusiastic in sports, it might be a little bit difficult to distinguish an overreaction to sports outcomes than in another place in the world. So if you have somebody in your life who becomes overly excited and just rolling on the floor excited about a sports outcome, or somebody who throws something and stomping around, it could be somebody who's very, very involved and very preoccupied with sports betting. But it may not necessarily be, as I said, some people are very, very enthusiastic about their sports. But this could be somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about gambling, planning ways to get money to gamble, planning how to get away with gambling if it's something that they've been hiding from family members or friends. And then we also can have people gambling to escape physical or emotional pain. So whether it's they actually have an illness or injuries, if they have a history of trauma or current trauma that's happening, anxiety, depression, these sorts of things. Sometimes for some people, if they gamble, that's a temporary respite from that. And just like with other addictive behaviors, we know that the solution, unfortunately, can then become a problem in and of itself, unfortunately. Another thing that can happen when gambling happens in a disordered way is when people chase losses. So if I bet on a game and I lose, do I immediately try to place another bet to try to win it back? Do I place a bet the very next paycheck in order to try to win it back? That's chasing losses. Hiding the extent of your gambling, as I mentioned earlier. So do you have to hide that you are gambling, or do you have to hide how much you are gambling? In general, it just as a counselor is one of the things that I work with my clients on. If it's something that you need to hide or you feel the need to hide, it's definitely worth something examining. So like when I sneak down to, take the dog out, but I am eating Ben and Jerry's, at 2 a.m. So if I'm hiding it, is it something I really need to be doing? Definitely worth examining. But we do have people who will say they're going to the gym, but they're actually going to gamble somewhere, or they will tell their loved one that when they went to Vegas and they came back, yeah, I broke even, or I came out ahead $100, when the reality is that they actually lost. And then we have people gambling in a disordered way when that gambling jeopardizes their work, their relationships, their marriages, their schooling. And then when people, as a result of their gambling, need help paying for bills, so they should be able to pay their car payment, their rent, that sort of thing, and they have to borrow money in order to do that. So there's a lot of reasons that it can get out of hand. And I think people, when I'm doing this kind of public awareness stuff, I have people say, I just don't understand how that happens. I mean, you choose to gamble or not gamble, right? And that's true. People make a choice. And our hope is that people will make thoughtful choices in this behavior and other behaviors, and informed choices, and know that even if you're making a choice, there's many reasons that that choice can get out of hand for you and can have unintended consequences. So how can that happen? Well, we'll talk about a lot of different things, a lot of them having to do with how our brains work, how memory works, the reward system of the brain, something called near misses, which is pretty fascinating, reinforcement of the brain and different types of conditioning, and something called loss aversion. So starting with memory and gambling, there's something called gambler math that I just touched on when somebody's kind of hiding the outcomes of their gambling, and they say, let's say they went to a casino and they went with $200 and they came home with $200. So they told their spouse, yeah, I broke even, but they went to the ATM 4 times. So they didn't break even just because they came back with the same amount they went with. That's what we consider when somebody is hiding the extent of their gambling. However, there is really compelling research that shows that how our memories work with regards to gambling can actually contribute to gambling in an unhealthy way. So there's something called saliency. If a memory is very meaningful to us, we will remember it clearer and for longer than memories that are not meaningful to us. And research proves that wins are more salient than losses. So guess what? Whether it's disordered gambling or just social recreational gambling, if I said to somebody who gambling is a part of their life, and I say, hey, how are you doing? Are you up, down, are you even? They very often are going to tell me that they're even or that they're up, and they may not be lying, because remember, our memories, we will remember the wins more clearly and for longer than we will remember the losses. It's just the way our brains work. And so when we talk a little bit later on about safer betting strategies, I hope I remember this, and if I don't remember this, point it out, because there's a strategy to try to combat this. And then if we consider how could this apply to sports betting, I'm going to give you an example. I love watching UFC, Ultimate Fighting. And so there's a fighter that many of you might have heard of named Ronda Rousey, who was just demolishing her opponents one after the other with her famous armbar. I mean, she was an Olympic judo player, and so nobody could beat her. And as we'll talk about my history in sports in a little bit, but my history has me really favoring the stand-up fighter. And I just said, one of these days, somebody with some really good jab and straight right is gonna just take her down. And sure enough, a boxer named Holly Holm was the first to take down Ronda Rousey with some excellent pugilistic skills. And don't you know, you have that moment, I should have had money on this. I knew Holly Holm was going to win. So how does this little thing about memory and gambling apply here? How many times did I call a match and I knew somebody was going to win and they didn't? Many, more than I probably call it accurately. So for that reason, we have many sports fans who can engage in betting, thinking and really believing, oh, when I call a play, when I call an outcome, I'm right more often than not. They're probably not. And actually the research shows that very, very knowledgeable sports fans are making errors of judgment in sports betting at the same rate as people who really don't know all that much about sports outcomes. And so there is good research that shows that part of this can be just by virtue of our memories, believing that we're much better at calling sports outcomes than we are. So moving on to some interesting research about brain imaging. There's some good slides that I am not going to show because I couldn't find a non-copyrighted one, but there's some slides that show the brain of somebody who is addicted to cocaine, imagining cocaine. And I think they actually showed this person an image of cocaine or paraphernalia. And there was this activation of the reward center of their brain. And then they placed that next to the image of a disordered gambler who was imagining gambling. And those very same areas of the brain were activating. And so it shows us that our brains treat gambling or experience gambling very much the way they experience a substance being ingested. So that's pretty compelling and interesting. And then similar research showed that, that there is less functioning in areas of judgment and motivation in the brains of disordered gamblers as in the brains of disordered cocaine users. And so there are parts of the brain that are really, really important just for everyday functioning and being a well person that can be adversely impacted by substance use and likewise by gambling disorder. And I should have put a little asterisk here too, because I am not a researcher, and I really should make it clear that I'm fascinated by research. I don't always, understand it as well as I would like. But this is one of those chicken and egg things. So there very much could be some loss of functioning in these areas that contributes to somebody developing the disorder more than somebody with the brain that doesn't have that functional impairment, or the impairment came as a result of the behavior. And so I don't think that that is clearly understood now, but it just really shows us that this is very, very similar to how substance use works with the brain as well. And so there's something that I find very fascinating called the near miss effect. And that is, I've got a picture of a slot machine here because I think it's a great example of this, this phenomenon. So if you think about the kind of old school slot machine where there's, just like on the screen here, a window with some tiles that will turn, and they'll have either numbers or little icons, and you pull the handle, or now you press the button, and they spin, and then they will turn up 3 in a row. And if you get 3 of the same thing, you win. But very often you get, a 7, 7, 8. But the 7 right up in the corner there, you can see it peeking down. And there has been a lot of research that shows that our brains are so very stimulated by almost winning, and in some cases stimulated more than winning. And so what does that tell us? That if we have a near miss, we feel very compelled to play again, and maybe to play more intensely than we would have otherwise played. And then also, please do think about, if you have been to a casino lately, or if you've seen any kind of video slots, very often there's not just one window where you have 3 tiles. There are multiple windows of play. So what does that mean? On one pull or one push of the button, we have multiple opportunities for a near miss. And so there are some ways that gambling games are designed that really stimulate our brains. So how does this apply to sports betting? How many times do you almost get it right? How many times do you say they're going to win by 4 and they win by 3? So again, just know that there's certain ways that our brains function that can be very stimulated to maybe play more intensely and frequently than we intended, just by virtue of how we're wired and how games happen. So this is something for any of you who've studied psychology that might seem familiar. There's something called operant conditioning. And this is in the definition by B.F. Skinner, who was the prominent researcher in this area, is an individual makes an association between a particular behavior and a consequence. And that consequence is either reinforcing or punishing. And so one of the studies that we can point to that this cute little rat here holding the sign is talking about is having a rat in a box, and there will be a lever that if the rat presses that lever, which I'm sure they're curious and just wandering around this little box going, what's in this place? They press the button either by accident or on purpose, and a little pellet of food will come out. That's reinforcing, right? And so something that's added that increases the behavior is reinforcing. So that rat's like, wow, that's cool. And they press that button again, and then they get another pellet and they eat it, and they press that button again and the pellet and they eat it. And this could go on for days. But guess what? If they pressed that button And every time they pressed it, a pellet of food would come out. After a while, they're not so much into it. They're not pressing that button so frequently. It's not as reinforcing when it happens every time. So the research really shows that there's a certain schedule of reinforcement that's very, very stimulating. And that is when it's intermittent and it's variable. So we don't know how often. So is it every third time? No, it's not every third time. It's not any time. It's 3rd this time, 18th this time, 27th this time, 2nd this time. So we don't know what it is, and it's going to keep changing. So guess what the rat will do when you have that type of reinforcement schedule? They will just press that button. They will just press it, and just like never stop. So think about how some gambling games work. Do they reinforce in a way that's very stimulating to our brain? And I think we can make the argument that they do. There's also something that has been found from this research, which is the speed of reinforcement really makes a difference too. So if it's very reinforcing very quickly, it's something that can increase kind of the intensity of that behavior. Well, if we are looking at sports betting, which is what we're looking at today, how reinforcing can it be if you have constant in-game betting available? So not even just betting on the outcome of the game, but how far is that ball gonna go on this play? So being able to have reinforcement at much quicker is something that could, just by the way our brains work, be very reinforcing to us and cause us to play in ways we might not have planned to. So moving on to another type of conditioning called classical conditioning. And this is learning through association. So two things kind of being paired together. And for anybody who has heard about these experiments, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with Pavlov's dogs. So there was an experiment where they had these dogs and they were anticipating food, and at the same time a bell was rung and the dogs were salivating. And the research showed that they began to salivate when a bell was rung. And we didn't even have to have the presence of food anymore. So those things got paired together. So how does that apply to sports betting, and how does it apply to gambling? Well, there's something called magical thinking. And if anybody here is a sports fan, and one of our participants who talked about how wild and enthusiastic their family gets in sports outcomes, did any of them have a lucky something? Do they have a lucky shirt, lucky socks? Do they have a lucky charm? Do they do a ritual? Do they stand up and spin around a certain number of times? There are a lot of behaviors and sayings and things that we can associate with winning. And it's not, I don't want to say it's foolish, okay, because we are thinking people. And if we really sat down and we said, hey, if I rub this cute little troll doll, if I rub this troll doll's head, or I rub the belly of this cute little cat that has the arm that goes like this, is it going to change the outcome of this game that I'm playing? We intellectually know that it isn't. However, it just can be so very compelling when you happen to have a lucky thing, or you say something, or this. I mean, how many times has somebody been sitting at a casino and they're not winning, and their friend comes up to them and they win, and they go, "You're my lucky charm," and then they're just going to hold on to that person like, "You're not going anywhere. You are, paired with this win." And so this is how that can happen, where people can start believing that stuff or sayings or actions can change the outcome of a game. And then there's something called loss aversion that's pretty interesting. And this is a brief clip to explain this to you, and we'll talk about how this impacts gambling.
Picture yourself in a casino. You put down a $100 bet. You lose. Do you keep playing, or do you walk away? In most people, the part of your brain that tells you to keep playing is stronger than the part of your brain that lets you walk away. Don't believe me? There's a city in the middle of the desert that was built because people have a hard time walking away after they lose. So why is there such a strong urge to keep throwing money on the table after a loss? It's because deep inside of our brains, there's something very powerful called loss aversion. Basically, our brains hate pain. It doesn't matter if it's physical pain, emotional pain, or the pain of losing something like money. our brains will do whatever they can to not have us experience the feeling of pain. Many times this is great. It protects us, it's helped our ancestors, it allows us to survive. But there are times in our modern life where our brain is trying to protect us, but it's really hurting us. Let me give you a silly example. Do you have a shirt or a sweater that you will never wear again, but every time you go to your closet to throw it away, you just can't do it? That's loss aversion. Believe it or not, getting rid of that shirt or sweater is going to cause you some sort of pain in your brain. And your brain decides instead to leave that shirt in your closet to save you from experiencing that pain. So something similar is happening when we're playing blackjack and we throw more money on the table after a loss. Our brain hates that feeling of pain associated with losing, and our brain wants us to win as soon as possible, so we minimize the time we're experiencing that painful loss. Loss aversion can get serious. People can stay in bad relationships because they're afraid of the pain of the breakup. Or people can hold on to losing stocks or bad investments for the fear of letting go. So the next time you find yourself at the blackjack table, clearing out your closet, or making some big life decision, ask yourself, am I making the best decision, or is my brain protecting me from pain, which could end up hurting me in the long run? Thanks for watching A Dose of Science, and I, for one, think I made at least one very bad decision today.
So that's just a cute representation of another way that our brains work that could have us gambling in an unhealthy way. And it's just something that's really good to know about in advance. I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are just the things that seem to make sense on the surface, but if we look a little bit closer, we will understand it differently, and it can affect how we play if we choose to gamble. So there's something called the gambler's fallacy or the Monte Carlo fantasy, and this is something that happened in 1913 Las Vegas at the Monte Carlo Casino, and it was a game where the roulette ball landed on black several times in a row. And what we had was a bunch of players who believed that because that had happened, red had to be coming up next. And so they just kind of went all in. It's got to be red for many times in a row. Just the more times that the roulette ball landed on black, the more convinced the players were that red was coming up next. And it landed on black 27 more times before it landed on red. And guess what happened? In that one casino on that one day, millions of dollars were lost during just those 27 turns because people believed something that is actually mathematically not true. And so how does probability work? Well, each event has its own odds. So if we think about the odds of landing on black or on red, the odds are what they are, and they are what they are regardless of what happened before, regardless of what happened the 26 times before. And so, for example, in a coin flip, or if we're looking at something landing on red or black, the odds are 50-50 that it's going to land. But the next time you flip that coin, it's 50-50 again. It's not 75-25. Okay, so the odds don't change due to what happened before it. And I'm adding in here, they don't change due to other unrelated factors either. Like I have my little lucky charm in my pocket, or my lucky buddy standing next to me who was next to me when I won before. Okay, so there's another cute video, and I picked this one because I just like this accent. It's just a nice way of explaining house advantage, which we've heard that saying, the house always wins. So this gives you just a little bit of a glimpse of what we're talking about when we say that.
Would you bet regularly if you knew you couldn't win? Because long term you can't win, just as the venue can't lose. It's called the house edge, and it's a part of commercial gambling. Take the pokies. On average, they keep 10% of every bet. Behind every button press is a win for the venue and a loss for you. That's time and money you could spend on a day out with family, relaxing on your new deck, or a luxury holiday. And guess what? You may get lucky in the short term, but over time, you will lose. The longer you play, the more you lose. Ask me about the house edge. I'm Jack. You can find me at knowyourodds.net.au.
Authorised by the Tasmanian Government, Hobart.
That's just so cute. But really, we've heard that the house always wins. And there's actually a really fascinating podcast episode. If anybody's interested, I will get that to you. It's long, and it really does talk about the house advantage and how the industry has what kind of like the long view, where the player has the short view. And over time, the industry wins out. And when we think about the revenues that are generated, that really factually plays out and is very convincing. So we do need to think about, okay, any of these things happen, and there's other reasons why somebody can gamble in a disordered way. Well, what are the consequences? Well, we know that people can experience a great deal of debt. They might go into bankruptcy, take out loans that they can't afford, cash advances, max out credit cards, lots of financial issues. I've been working in the addictions field for well over 20 years. I've never encountered financial consequences of addiction like I have with gambling. People can experience job loss, job problems, and these are big problems. We have people who, for example, have such gambling related debt that they're working 2-3 jobs. So when they show up to their main job, their real job, they're not doing so well because they're tired, and maybe they're worried about, how am I going to pay these bills? What am I going to do if my wife finds out? And then in some circumstances, they may actually be dipping into the till. You know, we've seen it, and we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, about embezzlement and stuff like that can happen. And very often there's gambling that's involved with that. Relationship problems, divorce. So very often when there is a gambling problem, it's not recognized in a relationship until it's really, really bad. And so people can disguise it, and it can look like substance use, it can look like mental health, it can even look like infidelity. So it can be misunderstood and misrecognized for many other things before it's finally recognized and discovered. And by then, you know, we can have people who are losing their homes, who have gone through the tuition for the kids, and we have some serious relationship problems as a result. And people can even become homeless. So people are unable to pay their rent, eventually evicted, sometimes homes foreclosed on. So it can get really bad in that way. And then people can even experience health problems, believe it or not. Now you might ask yourself, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's not like they're ingesting anything, right? But one thing that we do know is that gambling can be very sedentary behavior. It can be something that we do for many, many hours on end. So people can actually experience some of the physical problems that come along with a very sedentary lifestyle, including deep vein thrombosis. People can have bladder or urinary tract problems due to holding their urine far too long because they don't want to interrupt play. But we also have people who have gambling, and gambling problems is a very stressful thing that can lead to hypertension and even increase people's risk of cardiac arrest. And also, I do want to mention that if you're having financial problems as a result of your gambling, sometimes being able to pay for medications that are needed for other unrelated health conditions might be impacted. And so people aren't taking medications as they should. And we also know that there can be some substance use that can go hand in hand with gambling, including tobacco use, including alcohol use, and those things in and of themselves have a number of health problems that can result. And then we can have people becoming legally involved. The statistics actually show that people who gamble in a disordered way, about half of them commit crimes as a result of their gambling. So that's staggering. Those are huge numbers. And then this is something that really struck me the first time I heard it, and it pretty much strikes me every time I hear it, that people with gambling disorder attempt suicide at a rate higher than any other addictive disorder. And so people are losing their lives. It can get that bad. And so who's at risk? Well, we know that age plays a role, just like with substances. So we know that if a young person is exposed to alcohol or drugs, their brains are not equipped to try to protect them from the addictive potential of those as much as a mature brain, which we're talking 24, 25, 26. And so adolescents and young adults are at increased risk, but so are seniors or older adults on the flip side. Military and veterans, and there's lots of reasons for that. And then people with substance use disorders or mental health conditions, but also people with a family history. So one of the most common genetic kind of predisposition is alcohol to gambling. So a first order relative with alcoholism is more likely to have a relative with gambling disorder, as are a gambling disorder person to pass on that kind of genetic predisposition. And then there are some ethnic backgrounds that are at increased risk, as well as athletes. And that's something that we are going to really talk about today. I have a vignette to share with you. It's just a few minutes long. And so this is a dramatized example. And this is out of the New York Council on Problem Gambling. So I don't remember, but if it does talk about the helpline, I want you to go, la, 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 it's 1-800-GAMBLER. So in Illinois, it's 1-800-GAMBLER as far as the 24/7 helpline that's available in Illinois.
Hey.
Hey, what's up, Gare?
Oh, you know, my cable bill, car insurance, blood pressure.
Blood pressure. Don't you need a heart for that?
Ooh, cold, man. So, speaking of which, the rest are in the fridge.
Thanks. I didn't even hear the doorbell.
Yeah, your sister and her husband let me in. They were heading out just as I was walking up.
They got a really nice place here.
Yeah. I could get used to this. Ooh. Oh, whoa.
Speaking of which, how long you planning on staying?
I don't know, probably just through the holidays. You know, I should be back on my feet by then, I hope.
Yeah, Jerry told me what happened.
Of course he did. What did he say?
You know, just, he just said that it looked bad, so...
Yeah, it did for him. I mean, come on, money's missing, so someone must have stolen it. They don't even check with accounting to see if it's something they did on their end. No, money's missing, so I must have taken it. I mean, you just stuck around after all that?
Just sucks though, man, you know, because you guys used to be tight.
Yeah, well, his loss.
Yeah. So, have you heard from Nick? Is he coming over, or?
No, I don't think so. God, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
It's about time, huh?
I knew they were going to come back in this game. I knew it.
Yeah. You're about the only one, then. And they're practically in last place.
That's exactly why I'm about to make a ton of money when they win this game.
You're crazy, too.
No, just gifted. Seriously, though, I keep records of these things in my head. Different plays, patterns. That's why I watch the game with the sound off, so I can concentrate.
What do you mean, patterns?
I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's just little things, stuff most people don't pay attention to. It's like this weird sixth sense or something.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's just something I was born with, I guess.
Something you were born with? Oh. Okay, what happened with Nick, then?
What do you mean?
Well, he told me that you're into him for about 500, so... What was your sixth sense on the fritz that day, or...?
Look, that's between me and him, all right?
Sure. Some gift, though.
Funny. Anyways, I'll be able to pay him back, and then some after this, so... There we go.
What are you doing there?
Well, what else? I'm up in my bet. Wow, you want in on this?
Not now, I don't.
You'll be all right.
In what universe? Turn up the sound so we can hear what they're saying.
No, I don't need to hear what they're saying.
Well, maybe I do.
Well, then maybe you should go over to Nick's house or watch it with your buddy Jerry.
Really?
Hey, you come over here, you're starting all this crap.
Who's starting crap, man? I just, wanted to turn the sound up.
All right, fine, here, whatever.
How much money did you put on this game anyway?
They could still win, Gare.
How much, Joe?
Enough to get me back on my feet, all right? What else am I supposed to do after Jerry screwed me?
Did he?
What's that supposed to mean?
Joe, your place used to be loaded with people on a day like today, man. Loaded. Hell, we'd sit around and watch the games all day together. You, me, Nick, Jerry, John, Stevie, and them. We had some great times, brother. We really did. And you had to start in with all this gambling stuff.
Oh, come on. Everybody was playing the pools, including you.
Nobody
Gary.
played them like you, though, man. Nobody.
And nobody won them like me either.
You mean nobody lost them like you? Look around, man. You lost 2 jobs. 2 good jobs. Your place, your girlfriend, and most of your friends, too.
Bad luck, that's all. Most of those guys were never really my friends to
Jerry
begin with,
has
so...
proof that you took the money. And you know it, too. Man, he did you a favor by letting you quit and not turning you in.
It's not like he gave me a chance to explain myself, all right? It's not what it looked like.
It's not, huh? So I guess what happened with Nick and the rest of them? You owe every single one of them money, but I guess all of that is not what it looks like either. I'll tell you what it looks like to me, Joe. It looks like a guy with a gambling problem.
So now you're turning on me, too.
Nobody's turning on you, Joe. Everybody just wants to see you get some help. Everybody.
So my sister's in on this. Look, man, I've tried to quit. I have, but I can't.
Well, you know, I know some people that can help you with that.
I don't know about that, Gary.
Well, lucky for you, I do.
That's 1-800-GAMBLER here. So I really like this vignette, and I do urge, if you are an educator, you might consider going to the New York Council on Problem Gambling's website. They do have this and other vignettes that can give some good examples, but this really does show a number of those signs of disordered gambling that we talked about before, you know, the relationship problems, the disguising the gambling, the difficulty cutting back or quitting. Pretty much all of the things that we've talked about, we saw in this one example. So it is a good example, and it is a sports related example. And now what I'm going to start talking about is how are athletes at increased risk, and I would even argue that sports fans are also at increased risk, though I have not seen specific research related to this, but I do believe that sports fans have a lot of the characteristics in common with the athletes that they are fans of. And so this cute picture here of this cute little kid at a game, and he's just so excited, enthused, and really just activated and agitated by what's happening, very similar to the player on the field here. So we're going to talk about some of these characteristics of both athletes and probably of sports fans too, and how those don't translate so well in a betting situation. And then in order to do that, I have to kind of establish my street cred, as it would be, or gym cred, or however you want to say that. And there's this cute picture a long time ago in a far, far, far away. I was involved, so maybe not that long ago, in amateur boxing. I did box for 5 years, and this is me with an opponent out of New York City who her and I had a match, and I won that match to win the United States Championship back in 1997. I'm going to put it out there and age myself. And so I had a successful career, and there's that asterisk again. And so I will have a disclaimer about that. Had a good career, a good record, was able to kind of share information in my story and a number of publications. And yes, you do see Playboy in there. There was an article about the women's national team and that I was in, just the article. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll be using some of my own examples in some of the content we're talking about now. So there is a blog that I run called fightproblemgambling.com. And so some of this information comes from here, including my what I'm going to try to pose to you today is what makes a good athlete, and maybe what makes a good sports fan does not make a good gambler. It makes a bad gambler. And so let's just talk about competitiveness. So this is a very good image because I am 46 years old, I think. I'm usually off by a year or so when I try to do the math. I'm going to blame the concussions. I still, from time to time, arm wrestle. at family gatherings, and sometimes with men. If there's somebody who wants to go up against me, and I'll give it a go. And that's really silly as a middle-aged woman, but I do it. And so this competitiveness that is inherent in many athletes and in many sports fans is something that doesn't necessarily translate so well when you are gambling. And so you may not know when to throw in the towel. And for fans of the Rocky series, this is from Rocky IV, when Apollo Creed was fighting Ivan Drago, and we were having a throw in the darn towel. But that's not an athlete's strong suit. You had in the one movie, a famous Rocky with his eye like this big, and he'd say, "Cut me, Mick," rather than end the fight, I want you to cut me, to actually, bring down the swelling so that I can see and keep fighting. And so people don't know when to quit. And then let's say you win as an athlete, and I did compete locally, and then regionally, state, and went to the nationals. When I was competing, women were not in the Olympics. For sure, that's something I would have strove for. So if you think about even your Olympic athletes, so they win. Do they stop? No, they want more medals. So there's almost no end in sight. There's no prize that's kind of big enough to get an athlete to know when to stop. And we've all seen it with our favorite players, how many times they retire, and it's like, just stay in retirement. You need to stay there. It's very hard to know when to say when. And then when the athlete loses, there's this sense of, you don't quit then either. You just dig deeper. You got to dig down. You got to swing for the fences, right? And so these are characteristics. If I'm gambling and I'm winning, what do I need to do? I need to stop. I need to stop, be excited and grateful, and walk away and not gamble again for a while. If I'm losing, what do I need to do? I need to stop. I do not need to dig that hole deeper. So again, the way an athlete gambles or engages in sports is not something that's all that healthy when you apply it to gambling. So let's look at chasing losses. We've talked about that with the loss aversion, and think about the identity of an athlete. Do they consider themselves losers? Is that something that is acceptable? No, it's I'm a winner. So the idea of losing is just very incompatible with the identity, a strongly held identity of an athlete. So if an athlete or a sports fan maybe is betting and they lose, it just is very, very incompatible with how they perceive themselves. And so what do people often do? They try to get back on top, and they keep playing. And unfortunately, that can lead, as we talked about with house advantage and how stuff works over time, lead to more and more losses. And then athletes tend to fight through the pain. You see some images on the screen here of athletes getting hurt. And sometimes they get carted off the field or whatever, but sometimes they just, walk it off. You've heard that, walk it off, and kind of try to gather themselves, take a knee, and get back right in the game. And so athletes are accustomed to fighting through the pain. But when we talk about the pain of gambling, okay, so go back to all those things that we talked about as far as the financial problems and the relationship problems and the job problems and all of these things that can come about. We don't want to fight through that. That's something to not fight through. That's something to make some changes. And unfortunately, if you gamble like an athlete, you're going to try to fight through those. And unfortunately, that might mean you start experiencing even more of those. And so here's a case in point. This screenshot, actually a colleague of mine was watching the game with her family and saw this on the screen, and so grateful that she was quick with her cell phone to take a screenshot of that. But this is local, and this is within the past 6 weeks, I'd say. It's a football game where the teaser headline for an upcoming news broadcast was that a bettor loses $35,000 trying to win $1,000. And so we've all seen the promotions. I mean, how many of us get these mailings that say, hey, here, I'm going to try to put it where you can see it. Hey, we've got these great promotions to start sports betting. It's risk-free and, you're guaranteed. Well, this is somebody who thought they were going to win 1,000, didn't, put in some more, didn't, put in some more, didn't, to the point where they lost $35,000 trying to win 1,000. So that's what chasing losses looks like, and how quickly it can lead to some pretty devastating financial issues. So this is a little conversation about humility and arrogance. And so there can be some arrogance with athletes and even with sports fans. And it makes sense, right? Because an athlete psychs themselves up by kind of inflating their sense of themselves. I'm the best. I'm unstoppable. Like for anybody who's ever had, any experience in the fight game, there's that, what's your fight song? What do you come out to? Or even what would I come out to if I were to, step in the ring again? This song would really pump me up. It's always something very, very empowering and self-aggrandizing. The sense of I'm better than my opponent. I'm better than everybody. Unfortunately, there's this belief, and guess what? It's played out for athletes, that I can win by sheer force of will. Now, I will tell you this, my very first match, I crossed paths with my opponent in the hallway as we were going to our respective corners. And she looked at me and literally laughed and said, I'm going to kick her. And so I'm not physically imposing. I'm not physically impressive in any kind of way, but I have a determination, or at least I did back then. And sheer force of will sure did get me through that match. And in a way where it was a second round knockout, I believe, in my favor. And so that works out for athletes. This sense of empowerment can really translate to performance on the field, or on the court, or in the ring. But if I try to translate to gambling, can I affect outcomes by sheer force of will? No, I can't. I can't. But I believe that I can. And many gamblers believe that they can. They believe that they have a system, that they're better than the other players, that they can beat the dealer, okay? That they can beat the odds. And think about our guy in our vignette there, where he believed he had a system, okay? So the arrogance can kind of really come into play here in a way that is destructive to a gambler. And now let's talk about visualization. Athletes have mental preparations for their game. I love watching the Olympics. I don't know about you guys. I love it all. Summer, winter, whatever. But one of the things that I think is so cool, if you ever see the bobsledders getting ready and they're doing this, and they literally have the course in their brain, and they are bobbing and weaving kind of, along with how they need to kind of position their bodies to go around all these curves and all of that. Pretty cool. And it's they're very, very skillful at imagining something so vividly. They visualize the win. However, don't we remember from disordered gambling that a strong preoccupation with gambling is not healthy? And so because we have this ability to visualize and imagine so vividly, and it comes naturally to us, if we turn that to gambling and we imagine, I'm going to bet on this and this is what's going to happen and it's going to be amazing and I'm going to be able to pay that off and pay that off, it becomes so very, very realistic and believable that we're convinced it's going to happen. And so that's not a healthy thing. Unfortunately, healthy, adaptive in one setting, very unhealthy and maladaptive in another. Let's talk about adrenaline tolerance. We've all heard about the runner's high, right? The adrenaline dump is very, very intoxicating. We've heard the sense that it can be addictive, and it is very hard to match that outside of a sports setting. And so if somebody is not competing anymore, we're going to talk about injuries in a minute here, it's hard to replicate that. Unfortunately, remember, think back to that brain image that I didn't show you because it was copyrighted, but I talked about it, where the parts of the brain that are activated by cocaine are also activated by gambling. You can imagine that there is a way for some people to try to replicate that adrenaline that they got from sports encounters. And that's sometimes leading to some risk-taking behavior and thrill-seeking behavior that's not all that healthy. So for our LL Cool J fans, I love this. And any boxing fan loves Mama Said Knock You Out. Wonderful song. But don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. Remember what we said about how our memories work? We remember the wins. We forget the losses. We forget the pain. We have this sense of go big or go home. So again, 46 years old. I truly believe, if I'm being honest, you hook me up to a lie detector machine here, I am going to honestly tell you, if the circumstances were right, I would get back in the ring. And I would believe that I'd actually do well. I wouldn't. Intellectually, I know that I wouldn't, and that'd be a really bad idea. But something inside me thinks I always got one left in me. And if we translate that to gambling, you can have somebody who can be doing okay for many years, and maybe they finally got on top of the finances and they finally repaired the relationship problems. Unfortunately, if they realize or they think they got one play left in them, that can have devastating consequences just from one attempt to kind of get back in the game. And there is this mentality amongst sports fans and amongst athletes, go big or go home, and so we're not going to like dabble, we're going to like dive right in and possibly get hurt. And so I want to talk a little bit about career-ending injury. I actually did my master's thesis on the emotional and psychological effects of career-ending injury in athletes. And I didn't do that by mistake. I did that. This is my arm here. So this is why I beep every time I go through the metal detector at the courts. This was an injury that I had towards the end of my career. For the last year of my career, actually. I was a southpaw, and my straight left was my knockout punch. I had an 80% knockout rate, and I couldn't land that punch. I would pull it every time because I had such damage in my arm from the years of impact, and tendons torn and cartilage gone and bone fragments. And so all that to say that when careers end abruptly, the identity of the athlete is severely compromised. And you go from being this kind of important person and inflated and with all these potential amazing things happening, and then it's gone. And not only is it over, there's this sense of questioning, was I even good? I mean, I honestly ask myself, was I a big fish in a little pond? Because there weren't a lot of women doing this back then. And our identities are so wrapped up in being an athlete. So here I am, many, many years later. I have something that haunts me to this day. And I'm going to tell you, you saw on my little screen there, the ESPN2 logo. So one of my matches was to be televised on ESPN2. And it was so exciting. And out of all of the matches that happened that night, mine was the only knockout. So I won by first or second round knockout. I don't remember. It was amazing. And guess what? Al Bernstein was the commentator. My match was going to be commentated by Al Bernstein. But guess what happened? At this point in time, women's athletics and women's boxing for sure was not very prominent. The network stopped recording after an hour and packed up their cameras. Al Bernstein and his partner, I don't remember who it was still there, still watching, still talking. They didn't realize the cameras had gone. I didn't realize the cameras had gone until I sat down to watch it. And they played the first hour, and then they just played the results. And I never, ever, ever got to hear, what did Al Bernstein think about me? My jab was on fire that night. And then many, many years later, I still question, maybe I wasn't that good. I don't know. It haunts me. So all of this to say, I'm trying to give you a glimpse of how our identities are so wrapped up in being athletes and being winners. And when it ends abruptly, that can just all plummet. And how do you replace that? And how do you come back from that when your confidence is gone and your identity is just torn away? And at the same time, so when I was fighting, yes, I was in school. Yes, I worked part-time. But as far as like responsibilities, I didn't have any serious, relationships where we're getting married and having children, and I didn't own my own home. And when all of a sudden your career ends, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that stinks. Okay, you better step to it now. You got to start doing all these grown-up things, all these things that you should be doing at your age. And that just kind of hits you very, very quickly. So the stress and responsibility are just like amplified, and they just kind of descend very quickly. And you have people who just have this ongoing sense of just wanting to stay in the game. And here is where athletes and even some sports fans can really be at risk. Now that we have legalized sports betting here, this is something that's very attractive to many former athletes, current athletes, just by virtue of this is what our area of interest is. And there's tons of risk involved. And we have tons of characteristics that would make us not good gamblers if we're not really careful. And it can go wrong. It can go real wrong. These are just some headlines. We've all heard what happened with Pete Rose. He had a wonderful, illustrious career. And what do we think about? We think about sports betting. That's what we think about. And so everything else was just overshadowed by this. We have people engaging in illegal sports books because there's tons of money to be had. We have athletes losing their careers as a result to sports betting, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so there's lots to be made, but when you hear reports about revenue, please remember that that's losses. The people who played lost that in order for it to be revenue for somebody else. And we know that there can be sports betting activity that's illegal, and athletes' careers can be affected, and performance. And we think about, are there times when athletes are in some way encouraged to alter the outcome of a game as a result of a bet? Yes, that can and does happen. And so I'm going to give you a little brief video. This is actually the trailer for an interesting documentary about a very well-known personality who got caught up in sports betting.
Good morning, everybody!
For 10 years, I was the morning man in the city I grew up in.
It's Boomer Esiason and Craig Carton on The Fan.
It was the #1 morning show in New York and in America.
If you want to go into it, let's go into it, but not today because I got other people want to talk, and you're boring me. Goodbye.
Craig comes from a line of shock jocks talking about the games and who to bet.
What am I, 5 years old? How do you make picks not with a spread?
He was the crazy, zany radio guy, and then you had the common sense athlete.
He was the fire starter, and I had to play off of him.
You have 500 other choices on the radio, and guess what? You listen to me. The listeners didn't want to miss what I was going to say next. If you gave me 10 grand, I'd guarantee you 25,000. I won $80,000.
As it's turned out, that was the worst thing that's ever happened.
I'm now the Blackjack Whisperer. So I started to get approached by the people who wanted to know if I wanted to be in business with them.
I had no idea how much he was gambling.
I borrowed over $30 million to gamble with.
I had no idea that anybody was contacting him.
I thought I was the best, and I didn't think any casino could beat me. I won $325,000 in like 9 minutes and walked out the door to go to work. He would hand me a knapsack, and inside was $1 million.
He was out of control, falling apart.
If you lose their money,
Well, this isn't good.
only ends one way. I took $950,000 for gambling.
Can't take money for one purpose and use it for another.
That is fraud.
We had the world by the balls. He ruined what we all had. Craig Carton has been suspended.
Boom.
This afternoon, a jury convicted Craig Carton.
So that is a very interesting documentary to see how that can happen. And I do want to correct myself. A casino gambler, however, a sports personality with kind of all of those characteristics that we've been talking about. So I don't think we have time for this. I do want to just kind of share that anybody who is interested in sports betting or participating in sports betting really should consider spending a lot of time imagining, thinking about their favorite sports, what they love about them, their favorite teams, what they love, and kind of the things they love to hate about them, and their favorite players, as well as their favorite sports memories, and what could happen to those relationships, those wonderful relationships, if they are sports betting and they lose because their favorite player fumbled a play, or if they lost because their team didn't play well, or if they start betting against their team just because of the way that the odds are working. All of those things have a possibility of impacting someone's wonderful lifelong relationships with their sport, with their teams, with their players, and it's worth considering. It's worth doing some kind of introspection. And then making a plan for safer sports betting if you do choose to gamble and to engage in sports betting. One would be setting a time and dollar limit, establishing cool down periods. So are there times when I need to take a break from this? And then making a commitment to yourself, your loved one, your team. And this is, I wouldn't tell anybody what they have to say, but like, I will never let this get in the way of my relationship. I will never do this on your birthday. I will never bet against my team. What are all my nevers? What are all my lines in the sand that I won't cross? Making those commitments and making them in writing, and then researching the responsible gambling features. And I have those in quotes. We don't have time to talk about that, but that's what you would search for if you were engaging in sports betting and you're using an app, to go to that site and look for those features, because a lot of them do have some ways to kind of help you to protect yourself. And then learn and follow the guidelines for keeping gambling safe in general, which are seeing the cost of gambling as the price for recreation. So don't think that it's something you're going to win. Think of it as, this is how much it costs for me to participate in this tonight. Play with your own money. That means not borrowing money. And it also means not playing on credit. Okay. I saw something on one of the sites that said risk-free loan or something like that. And I thought, well, or even interest-free loan, you're still taking money that you haven't earned yet and risking it. So in a sense, it can't be risk-free. You haven't even earned it yet. So you're borrowing it from your future self. Setting limits and sticking to them, both time and dollar amounts, quitting when you lose and quitting if you win, not giving it all back as many people tend to do, not gambling to cope with personal problems, not mixing gambling with alcohol. That can be difficult when many gambling venues and events have alcohol, but those two things really don't mix. And then knowing the signs of a problem and getting help if they occur. There are responsible gambling features, as I mentioned, on many of these sites, including deposit limits, time limits, cool down periods, and then there's lots of other resources. We have free counseling here for gambling, both for the gambler and the loved one, but we also have free workshops. There is a workshop very much like this one, but we would dive deeper into this, and this would be for people who are either sports betting or interested in sports betting. They are free to any adult, because you have to be 21 to sports bet in Illinois. And we do have something right now where if anybody's interested and they do register and they do participate, the first 20 to register will get, so I can't really do it here. We've got the Cubs yearbook. We also have some Bulls yearbooks and some other giveaways for the first 20 who do register and participate. That can be done by going to the Safer Sports Betting website. So it's safersportsbetting.com. We also have workshops on other topics related to gambling. So anybody who's interested in that can just contact me and we can help set it up. We could do it by Zoom. There's the voluntary self-exclusion program in Illinois that can help somebody ban themselves from casino gambling and sports betting. There's Gamblers Anonymous, which is much like Alcoholics Anonymous, but specific to gambling, as well as Gam-Anon, which is a lot like Al-Anon or Alateen, a support group for those who love someone with a gambling problem. And then those and all, like our programs and other programs and GA and Gam-Anon can all be located by going to calling the 1-800-GAMBLER helpline or going to weknowthefeeling.org, which is the website related to that helpline. So I do want to ask this question again as we're starting to wrap up. I have one thing to kind of leave you with. If anybody is still on the Menti site, if you could answer this question again to see, has anything changed for us? If I bet more often, it will help me to win more than I lose. And my chances of winning are better after I have lost. And it really seems that we kind of all have learned something from this. And then what can you do? Please talk about this. Make a plan to be safe if you do choose to sports bet. Revisit the plan as needed. I did forget to tell you something. One of the things that we can offer, or we would suggest if you do choose, is to keep a logbook and keep track of the winnings and losses so that you can actually add them up and not rely on those faulty memories that we talked about before. Don't facilitate underage play. Please do not let a young person sports bet or engage in any other kind of gambling. It's not safe for their brains. And then I'm going to leave you, I'll leave a minute or two afterwards for any questions or comments, but just to kind of sum it all up for you, I have a video here for us to watch.
I'm scared I'm wasting my time, scared I'm losing control of my life. I'm scared of commitment, of calling anything mine. I will be lying if I told you I'm fine. Serving these tables to put some food in my stomach. I'm tired of seeing my mom and say no worry, it's coming. My heart is racing, I'm running to anything more than nothing. Drowning in debt and I'm trying to pull us above it. Tell me everything will be okay. Tell me why does everybody gotta fade away? Am I crossing your mind? Cause you've been all up in mine. But if I saw you, I don't know what I would say. Instead of being together, I need to get it together. Instead of writing these letters, I want to live to remember. Am I better from the past? Yeah, I wonder when I'll know. Haunted by a dream is when you really let it go. I guess things happen for a reason, but I'ma never leave anything a chance. At first glance, I'm looking for God's hands. The devil's looking at me like, homie, come dance. My grandma's getting sick, I'm never there when I can be. See my brother feeling lost, I guess it runs in the family. People telling me this music should be a plan B. How could you judge me if you don't understand me? No breaks, 120 going in. Destiny's calling, I'm like, baby, come on in. Right now it feels like do or die. Every day is who am I? You calling 9 to 5, man, I call it suicide. I see what they can't see, this is all that I can be. Rather be homeless and broke than be labeled as happy. They don't understand me, cause no one can stand me. It's always the outsiders who end up outstanding. I lost $100 on a bet. It's not a lot of money, but it said a lot about me. In that moment, guess I didn't understand it. When nothing is certain, don't ever take it for granted. Pride is a poison that infested our planet. Greed is okay, well that's the way that they brand it. Our view of everything is such a mess. Having less than we deserve is our perception of happiness. What am I supposed to do? They say follow the steps, stick to the guidelines. If I listen to that, I'm just a kid on the sideline. What's in your eyes? I don't care about your eyeline. Never cared about all of that. Money got people snapping for the quarterback. If I get it, I'ma give it back. I feel like happiness is something everybody should have. In the dark, well I've been shooting for stars. Looking for love, like is it really the heart? Or just have someone who's there when it's all falling apart? But every scar only makes your heart stronger. Hold on, just fight a little longer. I ponder these lines when mopping floors every night. That's when you feel the fatigue and all your hunger. It's been killing me, keep going with it, telling me more regrets than memories. Sometimes you gotta let it be, the past ain't ahead of me, I gotta get my best. How do I make change if I don't give you my 2 cents? I look around, I see the dying of youth. While you picking up a bottle, let me pour you the truth. I used to be like all of you, like you got nothing to lose. Nobody wanted commitment when everybody's been used. Step in my conscience, my heart is the pilot. The past is behind you, but lately I've been behind it. I'm finding I've been placing happiness in people who leave. Yeah, they love it when you're broken, hate you when you achieve. It's like I can never be me. The world is just a routine, telling you how to live in the certain value it brings. Like rings, summer flings, things ain't what they seem. So don't you ever buy the happiness that's out on the screen. Cause happiness ain't a store-bought can, and love isn't found in just a one-night dance. I'm looking at the sky like give me one more chance. I'm tired of sitting in my room like I know I can. Nothing's done until you do it, just look at what I'm pursuing. They doubted like what you doing, my girl, cause of my music. It was lose or lose it, my heart's to the music. If I didn't, I'd be dead, so I wouldn't, I choose it. Trying to figure it out, and this ain't even about us. I'm trying to be something more, some of my kids can be proud of. I'm trying to show everybody there's so much worth in these dollars. Out here making a difference, don't you give up. Every line that I'm writing is just for you to get up. Love is barely enough, yeah we don't give it enough. Man, what's the point of the top if nobody wants to look up? So look up, look up, don't look down. Look up. Look up, don't look down. Don't look down.
And that last slide there does acknowledge the help and support that we have from Illinois Department of Human Services, and other state contracted providers doing a great job of trying to increase the access to help here in Lake County and throughout Illinois. So what I am going to do is I'm going to stop recording now, so that if there's anybody who has any last minute comments or questions, that you can feel free